All right, welcome. Ah, I am so happy for this event. I know it's 6:30 right on the dot, but I can tell that there are already people signed in and watching online. So let me start by just saying thank you to everyone who has joined us tonight. It is truly an honor for me. I'll say that it's an honor to me to be able to spend time with a really incredible artist. And I appreciate everyone who is giving us some of their time this evening as well. A big thank you to everyone who's helped put this together tonight. All of the staff at CoPro, people near and far have worked really hard to bring this opportunity. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Um, and like I said, we're gathering from many different places today, connecting here over Zoom, on the internet, on Twitch, wherever you may be connecting to us. But I think it's always important to acknowledge the land and the people who've cared for the land whenever we gather. Here in Chicago, where Roland and I both live, those caretakers include the first peoples of this land. We live on the homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Odawa, the Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, and members of the Illini Confederation. Other groups also maintained a relationship with this land, like the Miami, the Wea, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Pakiwaki, Meskiwaki, Kickapoo, and Meskutin. Critically, we also celebrate the continued presence of members of over 100 different indigenous groups who now call Chicago home. We also acknowledge the many waves of migrants and immigrants whose labor built and builds so much of the city's economy and institutions. The Black, Brown, Asian, and Indigenous and Latinx communities that have faced oppression while also creating and sustaining so much of what this region has given to the world and leading many of the important struggles for social justice that have shaped the present and give possibility to the future. Artists and cultural workers should always be careful to consider these histories. Land acknowledgements are a good place to start, but they are also, as Heather Miller from the American Indian Center here in Chicago remind us, a call to action. This is a reminder to us all to consider more carefully our relationships to the world we move through. And in that spirit, I'm really, really happy to get to have a conversation tonight with an artist who's thinking pretty constantly about the ways that people, and in particular Black people, move through space. Roland Nolden is an artist, also an architect, also a really wonderful person to talk to. He's always thinking about really huge things like spatial realities and really discrete things like how we walk through the city. We've had many, many wonderful conversations talking about race, and critically for tonight's conversation, belonging. I am truly excited in a week in which I think we really could all use some deep and heartfelt conversation. This is a true joy for me in a time where joy is a little bit hard to find. So I'm again grateful to all of you for joining us tonight. And I'm grateful to Roland for letting me be in conversation. We are going to start with a short video. I believe that if you need live captioning, that is an option. So if that is an option that you would like to use, please take advantage of that. And I will be quiet now so we can watch a video that is part of the exhibition that's up right now in the windows of Co-Prosperity.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again, Anthony, for such a wonderful introduction and land acknowledgement. I just kind of want to start coming out of the film to read a short kind of side story that is also in the exhibition, kind of next to the videos playing for a little bit more. So, my entire life, I have woken up, showered, and moisturized my skin every single day, my entire life. I remember the day that I took my SATs vividly, but mostly because I was in a hurry and forgot to put on lotion. I nearly failed it. I couldn't focus on anything but the dryness of my skin all over my body. Every day I put on lotion. When I went to Liberia for the first time at 20 years old, the air was something completely new to me. I had traveled to nice warm places before, but this just felt different. I was to live in Liberia for 6 months, and by the end of the first month, my skin had completely changed. It had completely adapted to the climate. I would wake up, shower, and my body and my environment would regulate on the same frequency. I didn't have to moisturize my skin, and my body was made for that specific geography. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Roland. And for anyone who is watching and doesn't know that that is a text that you wrote, right? That is an integral physical part of the exhibition at Co-Prosperity. So maybe I we can get into like what the exhibition looks like. Everyone just got a chance to see some of the portraits that you created. But maybe since you started with that really beautiful and very personal, but also like kind of funny and also like just revealing kind of text, maybe tell me a little bit about how that became part of the exhibition and like how it relates to the other parts of the exhibition.
Yeah, it's funny when I think of like the timeline of putting the show together. This was like kind of right in the middle, and I would say it was something I wrote in kind of a PDF that I used to think through like film ideas and things like that. And um, through conversation, friend Felicia kind of just like pointed that out as something that was special. That was something that was just written that I had kind of threw down, and it really became something that I used to really see the exhibition in a different way. Um, in that it relates my body to a place, and kind of something that was indescribable, but it felt very real in my connection to Africa and my skin, and it really aligned body and place in a very direct way that I thought was something that was special and that I kind of by happenstance just wrote down and could connect with. So
And this idea of connection to from body and place is also really important to the portraits that are. Am I using the right term? Is it fair for me to call them portraits?
yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah, and
So yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, I think they're certainly portraits, and then I've been trying to think of them also as maps in a way also. So in the same way that you know mapping geography and heat maps um, become one and the same.
So maybe describe what I've called these portraits and what you're also calling maps. Like, tell us a little bit more about, if you would, tell us a little bit more about the video that we all just saw, how you were thinking of them as both portraits and maps, and maybe whatever other ways that you're thinking about them.
Yeah, I think starting with like the connection of um, body and place. I was really thinking about um, you know how I can make a connection to origin and a feeling of belonging that emerged kind of later, but a feeling of belonging as a connection to origin. And, you know, I think the idea of that kind of started almost as research in a less celebratory way. I
Mm.
think I was kind of started by looking at, the way color and mapping was used against people of color
Mhm,
in that I was reading A Billion Black Anthropocenes
mhm,
where they talk about how um, you know uh, black people went from being human subject to inhuman object through colonization, and how West Africa was viewed as kind of a mine for not only like goods and material, but for like literal black bodies. And so for me, in a very negative way, that relationship between black people becoming matter, and
Mm.
you know, as I talk about Liberia, for me, when I went to visit, I spent a lot of time in the mines of Nimba in like the northern part of the country, and to see kind of that extraction still happening. And so, thinking about mapping and contouring, these bodies really become a way to like, or when I'm thinking about these relationships between like the body, the physical body, and this matter, this land, it's kind of materializing uh, through mapping, like either through topography or the contours of the face become like a contour map in a way, or heat mapping, starts to depict you know the same relationship to a geographical heat map. Um, yeah,
And so like that, I mean, that's really, I mean, it's a good reminder of thinking about the histories of the way that extraction has worked and the histories of how people have manipulated the idea of like a black body, to remove the idea of humanity in order to like meet some other gain. And I think there's, you're, for me, drawing this really fascinating and challenging parallel between that sort of like super harmful act and then what we sort of just generally accept as a kind of neutral, although it's definitely not, act of mapping, right? Like we are presented maps as these things that it's like, this is just the world, this is how it looks, but we all know that's not really how it looks. And there's a lot of like politics and a lot of opinion and a lot of intention behind how those things work. And so I want to hear something about the intention that you brought into these portraits. You really, and assuming intentionally, decided to use one particular type of mapping, heat mapping, as the sort of like tool that you'd be referencing in these portraits. So what was it about that particular technique or that type of mapping that was making that you wanted to use in order to sort of like think through or make a statement about the ideas that you were thinking about in relationship to extraction and belonging?
yeah, and it's funny. I think of mapping as like a super powerful, loaded thing. Not necessarily loaded because looking at the Berlin conference or something where you're carving up Africa, like the control of the world is done through mapping and drawing, and I think that's kind of where the background in architecture comes in. But in general, thinking of heat mapping as a tool to bring color into the equation, like to depict um, in a way to relate it back to skin and the body and blackness in a way that our melanin, the melanin content of skin comes from the sun, the relationship to heat in our specific origin. And so what is just kind of like a weird or small scientific fact becomes like a connection to you know thermal hues and this radiance that I think when I said it mapping before wasn't celebratory. Now, those colors become something that radiates and has beauty and has strength, uh, and it's kind of a connection between the body and still land in
Mm.
Africa, um, and yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and so uh, since you've mentioned it a few times in that answer, I'm really fascinated, and I don't think in all of the conversations that you and I have had over the past about 5 months, I don't think we've ever really actually talked about this. But you were talking about the radiance of these maps and the radiance of the body. How did you arrive at the term radiant beings for this project? It's a
yeah.
lovely, lovely name. And names are hard. People underestimate the importance of names, but you've got this really fantastic name for this project.
Yeah, I don't. It's funny. I don't think I have a very good answer to that question, only because uh, it's funny. I didn't really think that hard about it. It was actually one of the first things once I had the image that came out of it, and something that I've never thought about changing, or and I think it's something that you view differently as you see more and you see the exhibition and the process of making the exhibition. I think the meanings kind of emerged more and more for me. Um, so like thinking now about space and uh, it physically like on the street, like radiating, like pushing
Mm.
outward, or
Yeah.
like cycling, or how these bodies are actually like pushing outward onto the street or projecting outward onto the street. Um, I think like now in the process of making the exhibition, like the meaning of radiance, you know, feels more embedded in the work.
Mm.
Then I guess when it started, it just felt right. But now it's really come full circle as something that's across across all of it.
No, that's so beautiful in the way that it's connected to both like these original maps, the heat mapping when you were looking at continents and stuff like that, and then the portraits you made of bodies of people, um, and then yeah, now the show, the project, the work has been up for like exactly a week, I think, and it has taken on this like new embodiment of radiance, and that's super super fascinating, and it makes me want to think, want to ask you another hard question, which is, another key thing that we started this conversation with is this sense of place, this idea of belonging, origin, and belonging, and things like that. Um, and I really am curious to know what you've learned about belonging. How has the idea of belonging changed for you over the time that you've been working on this project?
Yeah,
I told you it was
yeah,
a hard question.
yeah. Uh, yeah, it's funny. I think it's a lot like that the side story that we talked about first. That in making the work, I start thinking about how it relates to all these like life experiences.
Mm.
Um, and you know, uh, I was thinking like recently, I think I brought it up in a conversation we had, but my dad, when I was young, he used to walk around, and every time he saw uh, another black person like outside in front of the store or something like that, he would just like nod, and I was a child, and I would always see him just like nodding at all the, and it's like as a kid, that's a wild thought, but it was just like a kind acknowledgement of being and
Mhm.
belonging. Um, and I think, it creates a space where, and like, uh, maybe there were the only two or something, to at least create a space, right? And when I asked him, he's like, yeah, I just, it's just something that we do, I don't know. And, I think about that a lot, like creating space, or like if belonging or origin or this space or this feeling of belonging is carried like in my body, maybe it extends from one body to another.
Mm.
And if there are two bodies close enough and they nod, a space is created between them.
Mm.
Or, you know, or like I was just before the show thinking like, oh yeah, like I'm taking up the sidewalk, like it's like I want to push out, or something, that, you know, it can almost be not claimed, but emitted, like felt, or it's like a safety net in
Mm.
a way.
Yeah.
Um,
And do you think, uh, do you think that that is something that was, I mean, that a lot of this is sort of like underlying and holding up the work, but it's not like right in the front of the work. How are you thinking about the idea of like belonging in terms of like how it presents in the work itself? Because I think that the things you just said are like these really, I'm not going to call them like rituals, but they're like practices. Like these are practices of like Black folks moving through the world and creating community. And I love what you just said about like when two people do the nod, it might create this new space between them, which is like a really amazing sort of way to think about like how we influence each other and things like that. And so I think to me, there's a really strong connection between that idea that you just articulated about like two people giving each other the nod, creating a new space that didn't exist before, and this sort of like historical conversations about photography, specifically around portraiture. And I'm not like interested in the historical conversation around portraiture, but I'm interested in how this sort of like thinking about belonging in space how did you arrive at portraiture of all the different sort of, I mean, I know you and other people who may know your practice. I mean, even in the introduction, you're also an architect. You have all these different sets of skills. And so I think it's always fascinating to me to hear you explain why you picked a specific mode, you know. So thinking about that space that's connected, that's created in the belonging or in the with the nod, how did you go from there to these video portraits?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think in a way it was through color, or if I'm talking specifically about belonging, it was through
Mm-hmm.
color. Like like there's Richard Mayhew works, right? That
Mm-hmm.
are these like beautiful landscape images of like these amazing hues of colors, right? It's just like fields of colors, and they're landscape portraits, right? Like landscape images, right? And he's not in a way talking about landscapes as much as he like says they're mindscapes or something. But he's talking about the internal, and he manifests it through color and through landscape. And so for me, I think it's like a question of what does belonging feel like, and it's like okay, these colors, like this feeling of belonging isn't necessarily about the portrait, but it's like the emotion of these colors coming together, right? So it's more so like how do you how do you describe feeling or something that's inside? And I think color and portraiture was a way for me to like look within, or maybe like
Mm-hmm.
look through the eyes. um, I would think too, like, just another inspiration is like by portraiture. When I first like I've seen really incredible like works of black portraiture, there's a feeling that I get of awe, of this feeling of belonging, or of importance and wealth that comes, to me, is sent to me, that um, I saw a Mwaka Bwafo exhibition, and the images on my phone don't do them justice. But when you stand in front of them, they're huge, and you get to look into their eyes, and it tells you something about within. And I think that's where the portraits are not necessarily about art history, but are about what's happening inside, like the
Mm.
feeling of belonging. Uh,
Yeah, and
I
that
don't know.
thing that, no, I mean, all of these are the right answer, but that thing you said before about the like melanin and the connections to Africa as a continent and as a site of origin, and now hearing you talk about something that's within, and portraiture being a way and color being a way to bring that out, like that is all connecting for me in terms of thinking about your choice to reference and use like heat mapping and some of the work in the windows at co-prosperity is really sort of like directly making that connection, because you see these like massive, and they're massive, you know, like I think we will see in a few minutes like a video which maybe helps people see the scale. But like if anyone is in Chicago, I super encourage you all to go check out the show in Bridgeport in the evening. Just like it's beautiful, and it is sort of radiating, and it's, I think, important and great to hear you, Roland, talk about the ways in which you were thinking about not necessarily a history of art history or something like that, but like your personal relationship to these works that you've encountered. And I really think that um, this is me on my soapbox, but I think really great art makes space for both the artist's vision and their statement and what they're saying, but also has room for people to make their own sort of form their connections to that. So before we look at the video, which like sort of shows an installation of the work installed, I'm really curious if you could say something a little bit about how you're thinking about the public or publics, various publics. How are you thinking about people interacting with this installation?
Yeah, yeah. I think yeah, it's like my experience of these works of art, like I kind of want to project onto other people. And like in the windows we used I don't want to be too technical already, but we used a double-sided mirror, and when you project onto it, the double-sided mirror like reflects backwards, but it's also mirroring its context always. And so, you know, the the kind of hope always from kind of the beginning when we first started talking was that there would be a moment where maybe you're standing in front of a portrait and you're watching, and then the clip turns off, and then you see yourself standing
Mhm.
across from it. And I think uh, that for me is has always been the aim for the show, that it's not these beings that are separate, super separate, but
Mhm.
uh, there's something pulling you into the space, there's something pulling you into the beings, there's something that
Mm.
uh, connects you to them. That Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's too technical at all, but I mean, uh, I have heard people, in the time that I've spent in front of it, exclaim and point out, "Oh, I was watching this and then I saw myself," and it's a really interesting thing. So I wonder if you could say more just about this notion of like this work existing in the public too. Though I mean, like that's the physical and literal experience, but like I mean, you can tell me. I'm interested in any thoughts that you have about like what it means for this work to be in public from like the moment you realize, oh, people are going to see this all
Yeah.
day, or like what you hope. I personally love the sort of like slipperiness of work that happens in a space, art especially, that exists in a space where people will encounter it, and some may have come to see that, and some may been taking out the recycling or something like that. So like I'm really fascinated in that, and I know you as an architect and someone who's thinking about space all the time. I'm really interested in how your experience of this being in a sense, I don't know if you want to call it this, but in a sense, a work of public art.
Yeah, it's a friend asked me about it, like how I feel that it's playing, or that you're gonna leave it and it's gonna be playing. It's really funny thing that right now the show is on. There might be someone who is walking past it and is like looking at it, standing under it right now, and has no idea we're talking or anything like that. And um, yeah, it's super interesting to me, and it's like kind of that I've been making this work in my room and thinking about these things, but I think I'm trying to say something,
Mm,
or I'm thinking about things that I maybe can't say but are there in the work, that I
mm,
hope people can engage with, or just stand in front of and have their own opinions about, or maybe get that moment with. And I think those are the things we were thinking about. Like my architectural brain was like, oh, if you walk around this corner, and then I want you to stand and be this way, and then move around the corner and be a different way. And I think there's a lot of little pieces like that in the show that I hope um, people engage with, and I hope they are engaging with, like at all times. you know, whether yeah.
yeah, it's a particularly fascinating time to be making and displaying art, and I think this is, we can talk about this a little bit more after we watch these next two videos. But it's a really interesting time to be making work and showing it in the public, in like publicly, because our sort of like a collective and global perspective of what the public means, or what it means to do something in public, has sort of been altered. But let's take a kind of intermission now and show a couple, like we want to show two more videos that are related to radiant beings. One, I believe, is a sort of like an install shot from outside the windows, and then a second video, which we will talk about when we come back. So I'm going to mute myself, and you all at home will get to see the video. Hey, so Roland, maybe just to return to what we just were talking about, I want, I wonder if you can maybe talk a little bit about some of the formal decisions around that last, uh, that second video that we watched, and then I want to go back a little bit to talk about the public and the way that the work is installed. But um, maybe just describe for me how you determined. Tell me a little bit about how you made that second video.
Yeah, I think that that second video is more of a stronger attempt at mapping in that I'm looking at a way to um, really connect um, the body and geography. And so, you know, the contours that were once in the other radiant beings just becomes a single layer, and as does the landscape. And so, ground and the body are then like overlaying and very much, you know, interacting with each other and blending into each other. And so you have literally geography and body overlaid. And what it does is it's creating new space, right? The map of Africa becomes map of Africa plus my friend Davy's body, you know, and
Mhm.
um, I think there it's almost obscured. Like in the beginning, maybe you don't see that bodies are present, or maybe you don't see that land mass is present, and something happens in like duration where you're kind of like lost in this field. But things begin to emerge, hopefully, and you know, maybe Africa appears and then is lost, and something else comes out of it. Maybe you know
Mm,
something you think is hands or body, but I think blurring the line between body and this landscape brings them just closer together, much closer together, um, and creates new space, like an abstract new world.
mm.
That I think was the goal of
I wonder if you like actually are trying to just write these lines, or if it's just like a stream of consciousness. Because you just said, Africa disappears and then comes back, and something new comes out of it. And I feel like these are really like super tied into the kind of like ideas that you're exploring, like closeness, distance, like a sense of belonging. And I truly think that this is like one of the things um, that is important to consider. Like it's really common for us to think like here is a way to be, here is a way to belong, and that is the only sort of like path for those things. And life is actually much more nuanced and complicated than that. And I think I was really fascinated watching the video. There's a moment where we're not looking at a map. I believe we're looking. Is it a mine? Like, is there like footage of like a mining site? I know nothing about mining, and so like when I'm watching that, I'm always reminded of our conversations that you had about extraction, and it's really fascinating to me to think about like to some extent there is a connection to all these other places in the world, because like things that are being extracted from really specific places in Africa are going into our cell phones and going all over the place. And so like there are so many layers of how you are trying to draw these connections, and some of it is like really apparent and some of it is subtle. And so I wonder if you could maybe talk a little bit about like the subtleties of how you're talking. I mean, like what does the mining have to do with this work? How is that relevant to this work coming into existence?
yeah. I think in maybe ways that aren't so solid, but maybe are more ambitions for the
Mm,
project that um, or just things I'm interested in and still kind of figuring out through the work.
mm,
And that I'm super interested in how you know the mine that's depicted is a Solomental steel, right? And that steel is extracted from Liberia, but a Solomental steel, constructs the buildings or the I beams that go into all of Chicago. And like you said, like a lot of these materials, we don't know what's happening. We don't know, but you know, a lot of these things are a lot closer than you know we know they are. They're just happening somewhere else, but there are lines connecting our bodies where we are now to these places. And it's like uh, I felt always a connection to this place that I had never been. I've always felt a connection to, my parents referred to Liberia as home my entire childhood. And so you know, for me, it's like, how do you draw that closeness?
Mm,
Um, and then to find out, these minds exist, and there's this constant act of extraction happening, and you know, this idea of extraction is also like what shapes our world all the time.
mhm.
It's something that I just am thinking about uh, and materializing in these films, and uh, trying to understand the reality that's happening in Liberia and how, maybe they relate to things that, are happening in
Mm.
Chicago where we are today, the bodies.
That, yeah. I mean, that's a super fascinating question that you raise, and it makes me wonder what this project, I mean, I don't know if you have, it sounds like you have, this is not the end of this project, but it makes me wonder if what this project would look like, what Radiant Beings would be in another city. Is that something that you thought about?
Yeah, it's funny to think about rating beings like not in the way that I've been thinking about it, like not a window show or
Mm,
maybe not so personal, right? Maybe
mhm,
it's about not Chicago and uh, not connected to Liberia, but like uh, I think and maybe it's maybe yeah, not so specific to me, and my history with Liberia.
mm.
Um, and yeah, I think the future of radiant beings is you know drawing different lines between yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love that idea, and it fits with your sort of like generous personality. And but I also think like there's a way in which like this exhibition is extremely about you and your experience, but it's also like you have you have opened yourself up, and you have worked with people who have like literally let you film their bodies and things like that, and dry skin, ashiness, like these are things that transcend borders, right? So like there is also like a relatability in the work that you've created by like making it really personal. So yeah, it's super fascinating to hear your the sort of like thoughts that are starting around what this project means, cited as it is. I want to just take a quick moment to remind folks that if they have questions, um, I have had the great pleasure of having months of conversation with Roland. So if you all have the brilliant folks in the audience, our guests tonight, if you all have questions, you can put them in the chat, and then we would be happy to direct them to Roland so that you all can um, get to know this work better. And again, please check out the show. It's really fantastic. Yeah, before we turn it over to Q&A, I want to ask you, Roland, just kind of a cliche question, but one that I'm like super fascinated to hear your thoughts on, which is, maybe related to radiant beings or maybe not related to radiant beings. You as a person, I know you really want to focus on this exhibition tonight during the talk, but I'm really interested in um, your work as someone who is trained as an architect and is doing this like really thoughtful work as an artist. What is the next thing that you're interested in doing? Are you going to extend this project? Have other things on your mind?
Yeah, I think I've been thinking about radiant beings uh, as a project for a while, and I think uh, I've learned a ton about the core thesis about it. I've just learned so much through the process, and it's kind of something that I want to take into mapping, and like the image behind me, drawing and architecture and mapping. I think you know what I've learned is I've been mapping and drawing kind of where radiant beings started,
Mm,
and where I said like not not a celebratory way, maybe to show these negative forces, but I think the beauty of Radiant Beings is that it became a celebration. It became something that is um, really beautiful and about an interior, but it shows it radiates outwards. And I think for me, I want to explore what that can be. In the other form I'm interested in making maps where as maybe these in behind me are the drawings that I've been making are more focused on what's wrong. I maybe want to start thinking about mapping and celebration and things like that. And it's just a lesson that I think Radiant Beings taught me.
Mm. Can you say just a little bit more about that, like the lesson that Radiant Beings taught you? Because I think I think it's really crucial. And there's maybe a connection to what you described before, is that feeling that you got when you go see something like a painting by Makabuafo and felt like a sense of belonging, and maybe, I don't remember if you said use this word exactly, but awe. So there's that, and then there was this like these questions that you were asking about like extraction, and somehow it's all still in the same work, but then like you said, it definitely feels like a celebration in so many ways.
Yeah, yeah. It's like it's like a full circle. It's like you know, it's not like there's no negative or that it doesn't exist or this complex history doesn't exist. It's there. It's very much there. And that for me was kind of like the starting point for Radiant Beings. Um, but what naturally emerged, and I think is natural of like the work and thinking about these things, is like the joy and the beauty and the complexity and how all that negative and positive mixed together is actually something that's beautiful and all just inside of us. And it's pushing outwards. And so yeah, and I think that's something for me to enjoy and that I've learned that I've just, enjoy. And um, yeah, it's something I want to take, and keep in all of the work, not just Radiant Beings, but, in everything I do.
It's a really beautiful sentiment, and I so appreciate getting to have these conversations with you, because I feel like I've also learned a lot from Radiant Beings in the time that you and I have had the opportunity to work together. Well, I mean, you did all the work. I just got to like ask questions and stuff. So thank you for that. And there are a number of questions that are coming in. So I will read a couple of them. I'll read one, and then sort of Roman, if you want to just respond to them. So I may not go in exact order, but I think because we were just sort of talking about this, like sort of what we've learned from the radiant bodies, there's two questions that are really specific to bodies. And one just says, I love the comment about dry and ashy skin, dry/ashy skin, and how that was a signal that you were in the wrong place or coordinates for your skin. Can you talk more about this? The video seems to be trying to reveal things about Black bodies. Are you trying to reveal things about Black bodies for Lyndon? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like it's something that when I think about it, I also kind of feel weird about, like a question of like where do you belong, or like where do you like where your origin is, and
Mhm.
I think that's like a power, that you know there's a connection always to that place,
Mm.
and maybe it appears in, my skin being ashy because I'm in Chicago and it's freezing and it's not supposed to be that way, but it's maybe a reminder that I have this connection to this other place,
Yeah.
and um, yeah, I think it's beautiful, and then it materializes in things that are ritual, right? Like you
Mm.
even earlier, which I think is amazing, like the things we do
Mhm.
to be present and become part of how we live. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, I think it's part of the beauty and complexity, and so
And there's another question that was sort of related to bodies. It says, and I'm just going to read it here. It says, I'm curious about the model that is included in the exhibition. What were you trying to communicate with that model in relationship to the video works? And I would just also add, like, were you thinking of the people that were in these videos as models, as collaborators, as like, how were you thinking about them? I'm adding that little bit to the question.
Yeah, I think maybe they talking about the model, like the physical model, like the architectural model?
That's a good question because Roland works with all sorts of things. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's talk about actually, okay, let's talk about the model that you
Okay.
created in the exhibition, but I'm also actually interested in the question of the relationship to the people who are represented,
Yes.
which
Okay.
is a separate question. So I
I
misunderstood.
like I really like both of them. um, the physical model, the more architectural one is I think kind of the beginning of a project, or like the my first thought or sketch of something that is maybe to continue. And what I really loved about that is there are these mirrored planes, and it's a field of mirrored planes, and within there are, radiant beings, these bodies, but because they're mirroring, right,
Mm,
space is created, right? So when you look at one pane, there's nothing behind it, but it mirrors what's there, and it gets much bigger. And I think about that as like creating space, or space being made out of nothing. And I when you look at all of those, there are the images that sit within the space, and they start to overlay and overlap. And to me, it's like a spatial collage, where these bodies are overlaid with space that doesn't exist, or that you can only perceive, or that are getting larger than they actually are. That is again like a sketch, but it's really something I'm interested in, and like creating physical space without creating physical space. Or it's when I start to think of what is radiant beings when I don't have a window, or if I'm like
mm,
if I have to put radiant beings
yeah.
in the middle of a room, does it become a model where the same spatial relationships are made? Like you can look in that model and see yourself, and
Mhm.
it's overlaid with 6 images of radiant beings that are collaged around. So um, yeah, it's a thought. And then okay, so the other question about models, and my friends who were just let me film them, and really stepped into the role. They all, what I was shocked by in the process of making these films is that people brought so much to each one of the portraits
Mm,
that I could have never anticipated. It's like uh, even the first time I asked someone, okay, you can be, just act natural, and then they emit just their own
mm,
being, and some of them are completely aligned with how I know the person, and then some of
mm,
them are different from what I would uh, assume that being to be, or the personality. And so, it was really beautiful to see, each one really take a different shape, and see what people brought to them that I couldn't have anticipated. I couldn't have had almost nothing to do with, like Leger's dancing. Like it's just it's amazing. It's yeah, and yeah, it's something that I'm really grateful for. The people who helped me in making this. So,
that's wonderful. Yeah, and thank you for answering that little sneak question that I just like threw in there. There's another question that was sent in, and I'm just going to read it again. It says, "Gorgeous video, Roland. One question to start things off. How are you thinking about, and this is in quotes, heat mapping that we see so often in Chicago? Maps that are often related to either crime, health, or race. How the maps are so often the same map. How these patterns relate to histories of redlining. I know you researched and those histories in Bridgeport and the surrounding neighborhood. So yeah, this is definitely something that you and I have talked about, um, and it's obviously a thing that everyone in Chicago should be thinking about. So I think this person's question is asking you to like think about uh, how you're thinking about maps beyond the ones that made it into the project here.
yeah, yeah. I think that architectural language of mapping, right, and is materialized in so many ways. Like uh, how do you use color to communicate anything, either like uh, food deserts and things like that. Like we see like in architecture, we see these maps all the time, right? And to me, these maps have incredible power, right? If you talk about redlining and what the color red means in that context, it is something that, shaped the lives of generations after, And so to me, mapping is an incredibly powerful tool. And, these colors and these heat maps, and, if you use a gradient to communicate something, it's a powerful tool, and for me, it's like I just want to see how that tool can be used in different ways, and I'm just starting to scratch the surface of it, and yeah, it's all I think about. So
Yeah, and you and I had some specific conversations about redlining when we were talking about extraction, and some of that, um, you know, if you're comfortable sharing sort of like how you arrived at the decisions you did to include or not include specific references to those particular histories in Chicago. I mean, it's clearly something in your broader body of work that you're interested in, but do you care to share a little bit about how present or not present that is in this particular in Radiant Beings at this point?
yeah, if I like I think I tried to write in the beginning that it's like a connection between here and there, right? Like,
Mm,
and in my mind, that was for me personally is like Chicago and Liberia.
mm,
And if we're talking about mapping and extraction, right? The same way where we started the conversation, like the way those are tools for kind of negative things, extraction in terms of pulling uh, pulling minerals from the ground in Liberia, or extraction in resources from Southside Chicago. And
mm,
to me, it's like uh, all of those is fueled by kind of like the same greed. It's all kind of the same thing that started back then and continues today. So,
mm.
I think for me they're very related, and I think in the show, I think that's a lot for one show. And I'm just starting to kind of, I'm still wrapping my head around those questions, and you know yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was really you're clearly an expansive thinker, and I think that one of the challenges that everyone has when they're trying to communicate something, whether they are writing an essay or a piece of journalism or something like that, or if they're making sort of an expressive work of art in collaboration with people who are dancing on film and like the public, like as you have done. I think the idea of figuring out how to focus on the parts that are really um, like can help recreate the sensation or recreate the feeling that you're interested in. There's some quote somewhere that I read years ago that was talking about art is one of the few things that can recreate a feeling. Like you can write a book about a single day in history, but like it will be the painting or the photograph or the song that will get people to really remember the feeling, of what that day was like. And so I think there's uh, in our conversations at a certain point you were like everything is connected, and it is. But you really did a good job of helping us get to this space where we're thinking really about belonging and connections between people and place and things like that. So I just want to, I mean, it's been really fantastic to get to have these conversations with you, Roland. I don't think there are any other questions in the chat. And so we're going to wrap up in a moment. But before we do, Roland, is there any, like, we'll give I'll do a formal closing in a minute, but is there anything that we didn't get to discuss that you really want to take this opportunity to share?
Yeah, I think yeah, a lot of the questions at the end made me kind of excited to still make work, that this
Mm,
this for me is kind of a beginning. A lot of these things that are connected are here, um, are just the beginning of kind of more work to come, and things
that's
I'm going to be thinking about.
that's so encouraging. And I mean, again, I said it at the beginning, it's always so wonderful to get a chance to talk to you, because like there's so many reasons to not be hopeful and optimistic. And I think you are doing this work that is really addressing important and personal things in a way that is like so generous. So thank you so much, Roland. I really, really appreciate the work. I appreciate this conversation that we've had. I do hope that this is the beginning for you and for this work and for people to who go see it. I hope it's the beginning of their ability to engage with your creativity. So please, anyone who is at home watching, go and check this out at Co-Prosperity. I also want to say a very special thank you to so many people that really helped put this together. First and foremost, of course, Roland for doing so much work. A huge thank you to the folks who are still working right now, making this live stream possible. So Naji, Tamara, Nick, Paula, you all have done so much incredible work for the past few months. I have worked with a lot of different arts nonprofits, and this crew is like more generous and caring than practically any that I have ever had the pleasure to work with. So thank you all so much. Um, Thank you to my fellow members of the Co-Prosperity ProCro, the programming committee. We review a lot of applications for these window exhibitions, and we get the opportunity to work closely with artists. So thank you for the work that you all have done. Nemic in New York is helping on the technical end. Thank you to my partner Laurel, who is sharing this space with me right now. I think we should all thank everyone who is sharing space with us. And really, truly thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight. We are going to end with a bonus treat of sharing a few videos. Each of the videos that we played tonight, we're going to show all three of them again. So truly, thank you so much. It is an honor and a pleasure to get an opportunity to spend time with all of you who are in the audience that I can't see, and you as well, Roland. So thank you so much.
And thank you, Anthony, so much. And again, like to extend thank you a little bit more, to the whole CoPro team and Lumpen TV team, uh, Paula, Nick, Ed, everyone, and yeah, even the people who helped me with the film. And yeah, it's been really amazing for me, to just experience all of you, all of you know everything. So Anthony, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you all. It's been a pleasure.